Hello, welcome to TechPoint Fundamentals YouTube channel. In this video today we will learn about extension methods, and we will also see what is the difference between extension method and static methods, and how this extension method implementation is different from indexer when we are talking about static class, and what are the risks associated with extension method. We will see all these points in this video. So let's start the video. So what is extension method? Extension method is a special static method that is used to extend the feature, or you can say method, of any class or type. So extension method, it is introduced in C# 3, and extension method is one that is used to extend the functionality of any existing type, and existing type may be interface, class, structure, or anything. For example, in .NET, if you are talking about string, integer, float, date, time, these are types, and we know that in C# each and every type is derived from system.object, and it is a class. So each and everything in .NET is derived from the class, so they are uh, basically a type. So by using extension method you can add additional method without modifying the actual code and without recompiling. Extension method allow you to inject additional methods without modifying, deriving, or recompiling the original class, structure, or interface. Without deriving, it means we are not going to derive or inherit, or we are not also going to use composition to achieve these extension methods. Extension method are special kind of static method which are called as if they were instance method on the extended type. Extended type is nothing but on the type which we are going to add this extension method, whether it is a class, structure, or interface. The extension method have a special symbol in IntelliJ. I will show you that. And before extension method, inheritance or composition, it is an approach that is used for extending the functionality of a class. So these are points uh, pointing to the same thing, that you can extend the functionality of any type without modifying the actual source code. Now in C#, if you go and if you have work on LINQ and lambda expressions, so LINQ is completely based on extension method. So in LINQ it is based on extension method that works on IEnumerable and IQueryable. So if you see here, I am using list.where, this is nothing but a LINQ query. And if you go and see the definition for this where, this is, if you see here, t dot source where this IEnumerable, and this is, first of all, if you see, this is static class, right? The first condition for being a extension method is the class which contain the extension method must be static. So this class is static here, and this, if you see here, namespace system.linQ, right? And in this case, if you see here, and the second condition for extension method, that extension method must be static. So this, if you see this method aggregate in this system LINQ, this is static, And the third condition, the first parameter must be the type, and it is must be preceded by this keyword. So this is this keyword, and this is the type on which it is going to operate. T source, this is a generic type, that's why you can see this one and this one also. If you see, maximum all these methods are extension methods. Each and every method, if you see this and this stat, all the methods are static. This, see, each and every member of this system.linQ is extension method. So you can say that this system.linQ is nothing but a group of or collection of uh, extension methods. If you sum, if you see this sum symbol, this is also extension method. Why this is extension method? If you see, there is a down arrow, small blue down arrow. This is the symbol which denote that it is an extension method. And if you see this is showing extension in the bracket. You can see extension in system.collection.generic IEnumerable, which works on IEnumerable type. This is extension method which operates on the type IEnumerable. So this is the beauty of extension method, that you can inject any functionality, any method without modifying the actual type, right? So now, how can you create an extension method? So for example, let me tell you, I have to check whether a given number is even or odd, and you have to write extension method, so that if you want to check this whether it is even or not, you have to write a logic. For example, if number equal to 0, then console dot write line. So this is a way you can write, or what you can do, else odd. If you run this, it will print that is even, because 10 modulo 2 will return 0, that's why it will be a even number, even, right? So instead of writing this each and everywhere, because if you think that this logic will be going to used so many places, so instead of writing these things many times again and again, you can write an extension method on integer type, or if you want to any other data type, you can also do that. So I will remove this logic, and I will use the extension method. So I have already created extension method. In the helper class, I have created a helper class, because in future if there is requirement, I can add additional helper method as well. So the first condition for static helper syntax rule for defining the extension method. The first rule, the class containing extension method must be static. So in this helper class, this class is static first of all. So this is the first rule for creating extension method. The class must be static, right? So this first rule is satisfied, and the extension method must be static method. The second rule, the method, this is extension method, it must be static. So this is static, rule number 2. And rule number 3, the first parameter, it is also known as binding parameter. Why binding parameter? Because this extension method will be bind to that type. So that's why this is known as binding parameter. Must be the type on which the method is going to operate. And the third sub point is it must be preceded by this modifier. So what is our requirement here? Our requirement is I want to make an extension method on integer type that will check whether this number is even or not. So I have to write an extension method on integer type. Let me, if you go to this integer, it is nothing but a structure, and I have told you that extension method can be written on any type, whether interface, class, or structure. And this integer is nothing but a structure type, right? So now we have our type on which we have to write the extension method. So what I have done here, I have defined extension method is even, and the first parameter is the type on which I have to write the extension method. This is integer type, and this type is preceded by this keyword. So I have satisfied all the condition for extension method. Right? Now I will show you that in this extension method, if you see, I am using this keyword here, and I have written an article on static uh, class and static method, and I have also posted a video on static class and static method. I will recommend you to please go and watch that video. And in static class we cannot define indexer because we cannot use this keyword there, but in this case I am able to use this keyword here, because if you see, this is the static class and static method, and you know that you cannot use this keyword in the static class, but this is a static special method, that is extension method, and that is the reason you cannot have indexer in static class. I will show you later in this video, but for now this is our extension method, right? Whenever you want you can use this. Now in order to use this, since you have created this extension method for your own purpose, right, so it will not be global, right? So whenever anybody want to use this, you have to use namespace. You have to define where you have extended this method. For example, in the previous case, in case of system.linQ, you have to use this using system.linQ to use linQ extension method. So this is using statement. So in the similar fashion, you have to use the namespace. If you remove this, you will not be used to you will not be able to use any linQ extension method. So in the similar fashion, in order to use this extension method, you have to use import namespace into your source code with using directive. Now I have defined number 10 here, and I am calling this extension method. Let me, if you remove this number dot Now if you see, you are getting this extension method is even, and is even, if you see, it is showing extension bool int is even. It returns boolean type which operates on integer type, and it is an extension method. If you see, there is a small down arrow, blue down arrow, this is nothing but indicator that it is extension method. So this is extension method, and you can use it anywhere. If you run this program, is 10 even, in both case we are getting true, means our extension method is working fine here. But in this syntax you are able to use this is even method as extension method. When you press dot here, you are getting intelligence that it seems like this is even method is the part of this type integer, and this number is nothing but a variable here, and this variable type is integer, and you can see that it is a method which is defined in the integer type itself, right? But if you want to use this extension method without any type here, so the first thing you have to consider about this integer type here. If you can pass any number here, in the second example you can see here, I am not using this as extension method, though this is extension method, but I am not using on the type here. For example, here I am using number dot, but here I am calling that method directly using helper dot is even method. This is static class name, and this is the method name, static method name, and we know that we can call the method without creating the object of that class, because this is static method and this is static class. So here you are also able to call this extension method without any change. Let me put it here 10.5 here, and this is, since the type is double here, you will not be able to call this method. The reason behind is this extension method which you have written, it operates on integer type, and here you are passing double or decimal type, right? So that's why you are not able to call it. But if you are passing integer number here, for example 10, you are able to call that, right? Now I will show you the IL code which is generated by this extension method. Let me, if you want to see the IL code, you have to go Visual Studio, developer command prompt, ILDASM, and here you have to you have to provide the path for the exe or DLL which you want. Now here I have defined the extension method in the helper.cs file. So this is my helper.cs file, and in this, if you see here, let me, this is a static class. If you see here, it is showing as NC sealed, and is even, this is the method, and if you see, there is a special attribute, extension attribute. So this is appended here. So this is a special type of method here, and the type is If you see here in pink, it is showing S, means it is static, and this static method is of type extension method. That's why extension attribute is denoted here. Now similarly, if you want to write any extension method on date type formatter, so if you want, you can also pass a second parameter as well. Our condition is the first parameter of extension method must be the type on which it is going to operate, and it must be preceded by this keyword. Now if you want, you can pass additional parameter as well, but in order to pass the additional parameter, you can only pass that after the first parameter, that is type parameter. The first parameter is not specified by calling code because it represents the type on which the operator is being applied. So same thing here. If you see, I will show you here. The first, I have created a extension method on date type parameter as well in the same local date time format, and here I have used this, that is the first parameter which is going to operate on date time type, and the second parameter is of type string, and this is a static method, the static method, and since this is this keyword we have used here, it is an extension method. And you can use this additional parameter to write your own logic. Here if you see, if the type is US, in that case we will use month first, and otherwise we will use date first. So this is simple extension method here, and the rule to pass this parameter, that I have told you, that the first parameter is not specified by the calling code. When I have called that extension method, I have not passed the first parameter. This is the default one because I have used this type as default parameter. That's why there is no need to pass. If you want, you can ignore that. But in second case, I have not passed the type on which it is going to operate. It is by default pick the type for the first parameter, that is date time. Here, from here it understand the type which we have to operate on date time, so you can pass only the second parameter. But in this case, if you see here, since I am not calling that extension method as with the data type, I am calling that method directly, this extension method I am calling directly, and in that case you have to pass this type. So this is the interview question that interviewer can ask, can you pass the first parameter, that is the type parameter, also when you are calling the extension method? So answer is both yes and no. The reason behind it, in this case, when you call this extension method with the type or any variable, in that case there is no need. But if you are calling that method directly with static class name and method name, in that case you have to pass that. If you see, in this case I am passing this date time variable here, and in this case I am passing both parameter. The first one is the type and second one is the format in which I want to print this date. But in the similar fashion, if you want, you can call this to local date time format, and this is the extension type format. I am calling this extension method on the type, and this is variable is type of type date time. So this is Now here you cannot pass this, there is no need, right? If you try to pass this, cannot convert from system.datetime to string. Why it is showing this error message? Because the compiler know that this extension method is going to operate on date time type, but you are passing this one, and the compiler wants this to be passed, you can say this parameter to be assigned on the second parameter, and the second parameter is of type string. That's why you are getting this error message. Argument 2, it will by default going to pass this argument to the second type parameter, and the second type parameter is string. That's why you are getting this error message. System dot date time is not compatible to string type. Though in both the cases I am calling this extension method, but the way I am calling this is different here. So here there is no need to pass the first parameter, that is type parameter, but here I have to pass that both parameter, because I am calling that method directly, not with the type. If you run this, control F5, you are able to get. In the first case, it will by default return in the Indian date format, so that's why 11/9, and the second 9/11 means month is first. Now coming to the next topic, custom extension method. Now this is, we have written this extension method when we are going to operate on the type which are defined in the .NET framework, or in many times when we use any third-party DLL, right? So in that case we have no control over this system type, because you cannot write any or modify the code which is written in this integer type or date time, right? But if any user has written any custom class or interface, so in that case also you can write extension method. So I have written a core library. This is nothing but for example, you can consider this as a user defined custom type, right? This is core library, and this core library will contain some method which is global for all the application. So I have written this core library, and I have defined a print method here, and later someone which is inheriting or using this core library, he want to add something, for example display method, right? So user the developer goes and created a extension method core helper, and in that core helper he has added display method and log method here, and these both type is going to operate on core library, and this core library is nothing but the uh, library or class which is defined earlier, right? So these two methods user has defined these extension method. Now if you have to call this, let me, I have created object of this core library, and when you have to call that library.display method, so this display method is defined where this is extension method, and this is extension method. So in core library, for example I have print method also, so let me call that method library.print this method. Now you are able to call this, since this library core library actually contains this print method, that is the actual instance method, and these display and log, these two methods or extension method which is created later. If you run this program, extension method, uh, two extension method and one core library method is called. Now I have asked a question here. What is the risk associated with extension method and when one should use extension method here? Now suppose your application is being used since a long time on production. Now you have used this display and log extension method, but in future there is some developer which is new to our application, and he goes and rectified, uh, refactored the code, and he has added some method in the core library itself. He does not know about these display methods, right? These extension method basically, and the developer goes and created a method with the same name and signature in the core library itself, because he does not understand, because here you have not used composition, you have not used inheritance, right? So there is no track at all. So he goes and created an extension method, because you have not decorated this method as abstract class or sealed class, or uh, any, you have not defined any private constructor as well. So this is open for extension and anything. So this person has added one more method with the same name and signature, the display. Now this one change, this single change, this is not a single change, it will break down the complete system. For example, if the user has written some logic which is working on production in this display method, this is the simple dummy example, but it might contain some logic here. Now when you run this application, see the magic, what is happening here. This display method is calling core library display method. Now this is not going to call the extension method which you have defined, and since beginning it was working fine and this extension method is being used here. But since any new developer has written a method in the core library itself with the same name and signature, and in that case the precedence will be on the instance method itself, not the extension method. Now whatever logic you have written here, it will going to break. So there are some rules when you are using extension method. The extension method can have only one binding parameter, and that should be defined in the first place of the parameter list. We have seen that if required, an extension method can define with a normal parameter also. We have also seen that you can define the additional parameter as well along with the first type parameter. You can use extension method to extend a class or interface, but not override their methods here. This rule happens here, right? And the problem which we are facing here, that might be vice versa, right? If you are defining extension method with the same name and parameter which is already defined in the base type, in that case it will not going to work. And similarly, if you have defined any extension method and later a developer goes and created some instance method in the base type, in that case your extension method will not be called. It will, the compiler will always bind and call the base type extension method. That's what we are facing here. So that this is the same rule which you are seeing here. You cannot override a method of the base type. At compile time, extension method always have lower priority than instance method defined in the type itself. It means the extension method always has lower priority, and that is the reason why this extension method is called of the base core library type, not the extension method. Extension method cannot access any private data in the extended class. So this extension method will not be able to use or call any private member which is defined in this core library. Now the you have know the risk associated with this extension method. Either anybody has defined the method with same name and signature in the base type, it will not going to work. And also you cannot override, or you cannot define any extension method with same name and parameter. The problem is, if you are using any third party DLL, for example integer type, you are not if you are not understanding what are the method, what are the type uh, uh, created in that type, in that case you are creating extension method. And if there is any method which is defined with the same signature in the base type, it will not going to work. So the question is, when you have to use the extension method. So only three conditions when you have to go with the extension method. And I have already created a video on fragile base class problem. I will highly recommend you to please go and watch that video. There are three parts of the fragile base class problem. The first one is what is fragile base class problem, and the second one uh, the composition, why composition is immune to fragile base class problem, and the third part, what are the solution provided by the .NET framework to resolve the fragile base class problem. I have posted three video. You can find the link in the description or I button. So the same problem is here. We have seen that if anybody alter the code of the base type, it might be possible your system or computer application will go down if you have used extension method. So when you have to go with extension method only when the original source is not under your control. For example, if you are using third party DLL or in system type, for example in my case integer or date time, in that case you can use, because normally when there is any change in these namespace and type, so they are normally backward compatible, right? So you can trust that, but still there is chance when the derived object is inappropriate or impossible, when you cannot derived object. For example, the class is shield, in that case you cannot inherit from that class. In that case, if you want to add some extension method, you can go with that, because you have to use the existing feature along with the new which you want. So to achieve that, either you have to use composition or inheritance, right? So that is the difference between extension method, inheritance and composition. So I have already posted a video on composition when I am describing about the fragile base class problem. So I will highly recommend to you, please go and watch that video. So in extension method, we neither inherit nor use composition. So this rule is when you are able to inherit or use composition. Composition means you are creating instance of that class. Abstract class, for example, you cannot create object of that abstract class, so you can use inheritance for that. In case of shield method, you cannot inherit, but you can create object. So in both way you can achieve the same thing. When the functionality should not be exposed beyond its application scope. So sometimes the scope of the method is also a case when you cannot able to expose beyond its applicable scope. For example, there are different type of access modifier: public, uh, uh, private, protected, internal, all those type. And for different type of access modifier, there are some limitation where they can be used. So if that is the case, you can use extension method, because extension method you can provide your desirable type, whether you want to make those at public or private or protected or internal, whatever you want. You can define this type. This class should be internal or public, this extension method should be public or protected. So you can you have control on these access modifier, but you cannot if you have not control over the type uh, uh, accessibility, in that case you can achieve this using extension method. The risk which is I have already explained about, the same like fragile base class problem. When using extension method to extend the type whose source code you are not in control of, you can risk that the change in the implementation of the type will cause your extension method to break. And that's what we have seen here. Since there is change in core library, this display method is going to break, because it will call the base core library method. Now static method versus extension method. So in extension method, the first parameter is always and always and always is the type parameter, and it is preceded by the this keyword, and this is the also static method. But normal static method, there is no condition that this must be a type, and you have to use this keyword. So that is the difference between these static method and extension method. And one more thing I would like to tell, that indexer. In indexer, let me show you what is indexer. Indexer is nothing but a way to access the list type object with index. So I have created a simple indexer here. This is the class employee, and it contains some list of employee. You can set and get both using index. So I have created indexer here for setting and getting. So this is employee list, and if you see here, I am using this here, this keyword, and this keyword is nothing but it refer to the current instance of this employee type. Current instance, or you can say current type. This is nothing but this employee, and the index position is this. Whatever you want to pass here, it will go and set. And similarly, this is the get, and this is the set. If you pass some index and try to assign some value, it will go and save on that index position that value. And if you want to read out that, you can pass the index, and if the value is there, you will get the value, return employee list. Otherwise, it will throw the index out of range. This is very straightforward, simple uh, indexer here. And in this program file, let me comment undo. See, I am assigning at 0 position Alex and 1 position Thomas. So this will set the value, and this is get the value, where because this right side allocation will save this value on this index position, and here I am invoking, I am getting the indexed value on this 0 and 1 position. If you run this, you are able to get, since on 0 position I have set Alex, and on 1 Thomas, that's why I am getting Alex and Thomas on 0 and 1. But the problem is, if you want to make this class as static, so now there is a problem here. If you see this, cannot declare indexer in static class. The reason behind is the class is static and you cannot use this keyword all in this static class, but in case of indexer you are able to use this keyword here. So that is the, you can say, the difference, that in this extension method you can use this keyword though the class is static here and the method is also static, but in case of indexer you cannot use indexer in the static class because you cannot use this keyword here. That is also a difference between these indexer and this keyword in the normal class and the static class. So that's all for today. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have learned something from this video, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you very much.